Throughout history, the rise and fall of empires have shaped the course of international relations, leaving indelible marks on the global landscape. From the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt to the mighty Roman and Mongol empires, the quest for power, territory, and resources has been a driving force behind geopolitical maneuvering. These historical examples serve as poignant reminders of the complexities inherent in navigating international relations, where rivalries and alliances shape the ebb and flow of global dynamics. Just as past empires sought to expand their influence and control, modern nations, particularly China, grapples with similar ambitions on a global scale. We are in a quest to find China's #1 enemy. It is essential to approach this topic with a balanced perspective and understand that international relations are complex with many shades of gray. There are multiple arguments, facts, statistics, and examples that second facts that in our contemporary world that who is the foremost enemy of China. Let us analyze different situations and draw parallels for our analysis. Historically, the South China Sea has been a critical nexus of trade, geopolitical strategy, and territorial contestation. As China's global influence has surged, so too has its activity in this maritime realm, intensifying debates about its role as a potential primary adversary. Central to this debate is China's extensive territorial claims, which fly in the face of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. While UNCLOS traditionally allows for specific maritime boundaries, China's ambitious claims and its decision not to ratify the treaty, despite signing it, challenge this international norm. China's militarization of the South China Sea, marked by the creation of artificial islands and their subsequent armament, threatens regional stability. Such aggressive posturing, coupled with tactics of intimidation against foreign ships, pinpoints its escalating assertiveness. This assertiveness isn't new. Historical skirmishes such as the Battle of the Paracel Islands in 1974 highlight the region's volatility. Strategically, the South China Sea's importance is undeniable. A staggering $3.5 trillion worth of shipping traffic traverses its waters annually, and it acts as a pivotal route for oil and gas transportation from the Middle East to East Asia. Beyond this, the latent potential of its rich fishing grounds and untapped oil and gas reserves showcase the region's geoeconomic value. The dynamics of the South China Sea present a challenge to U.S. leadership in the Asia-Pacific. As China leverages its growing economic and military prowess to stake its dominance, the U.S., in championing navigation freedom and decrying regional militarization, finds itself on a collision course with the Asian giant. The tensions between these two superpowers in this maritime realm serve as a microcosm of the broader geopolitical landscape, often casting China in the role of a primary global adversary. China's trade behavior has for decades been a point of contention in international relations, especially with the United States, solidifying its position as a perceived primary adversary in global economic dynamics. Historically rooted trade grievances like intellectual property theft and forced technology transfers have caused significant friction. For instance, numerous American corporations have accused China of pilfering their intellectual properties, a glaring testament to Beijing's aggressive approach to economic advancement. Furthermore, the coercive strategies that oblige American entities to share technology with Chinese counterparts before accessing their market are not just aggressive, but also tilt the playing field in favor of Chinese businesses. Statistically speaking, the ramifications of China's trade strategies manifest in the growing trade deficit that the U.S. endures, which exceeded $350 billion. This imbalance, continually expanding, highlights the economic strain the U.S. faces because of these practices. Such practices, beyond individual instances, cost American industries billions of dollars, both from intellectual property theft and losses in the job market due to unlevel competition. Historical insights into the issue are evident in the Trump administration's response in 2018. Addressing these inequities, tariffs were slapped on Chinese goods, a move reciprocated by China, igniting a trade war that has had far-reaching consequences on the global economic fabric. Consumers globally bear the brunt with increased prices, while businesses in both nations grapple with the fallout, highlighting profound discord in U.S.-China relations.
I happen to think that tariffs for our country are very powerful. You know, we're the piggy bank that everybody steals from, including China.
To many, China's trade strategies not only signify economic transgressions, but also threats to the U.S.'s national security. This perspective views China's maneuvers as an ambitious drive for global economic hegemony, warranting a fortified U.S. stance to safeguard its national interests. On the flip side, a segment believes in the potential of U.S.-China collaboration despite these challenges. Given these intricacies, China's trade conduct and the consequent American responses firmly place it in the limelight of international debates, often casting it as the foremost global adversary. China's human rights transgressions, particularly concerning the Uyghur Muslim community in Xinjiang, have escalated its perception as the foremost global adversary. Historically, nations have clashed over territorial and economic ambitions. However, gross human rights violations like those in Xinjiang have catapulted these concerns to the forefront of international discourse. China's maltreatment of religious minorities, especially the Uyghurs, stands as a glaring example to its authoritarian approach. The campaign against the Uyghurs isn't merely repression, it's an orchestrated endeavor encompassing mass detentions, forced labor, and a calculated effort to erase their cultural identity. Notable instances from the past, as highlighted by Human Rights Watch, reveal over 1 million Uyghurs and Muslim minorities incarcerated in Xinjiang internment camps, facing forced labor, political indoctrination, and even torture. The destruction of mosques and religious landmarks by the Chinese government further attests to this repression. Statistics strengthen the accusations against Beijing. A 2021 study by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute unveiled the construction of over 400 political re-education centers in Xinjiang. Simultaneously, the United Nations in 2022 provided compelling evidence of Uyghurs undergoing torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. China's blanket denial of these allegations contrasts starkly against an accumulating reservoir of evidence pointing toward their intensive clampdown on the Uyghurs.
所谓中国在新疆实施种族灭绝和犯反人类罪，彻头彻尾、蓄意炮制的、耸人听闻的伪命题和恶意的荒唐闹剧。
The aforementioned human rights infringements have strained China's relations with the global community, placing it under the microscope as a leading global antagonist. Nations worldwide, including the U.S., have vociferously condemned China's tactics in Xinjiang, with some imposing sanctions. From the American perspective, Xinjiang's situation is not just about the Uyghurs, but a reflection of China's broader ambitions and disregard for international norms. China's track record in Xinjiang will undoubtedly remain a contentious point, magnifying its image as a primary antagonist in global geopolitics.
All of that speaks to an effort to commit genocide.
重要的事情说3遍：中国没有种族灭绝，中国没有种族灭绝，中国没有种族灭绝。句号。
In the global arena, where nations maneuver for influence and power, China's handling of Hong Kong and Taiwan has intensified perceptions of it as the preeminent adversary, especially from a Western perspective. Hong Kong, once a bastion of freedoms and autonomy under the one country, two systems model, has witnessed a rapid erosion of its cherished liberties since the introduction of the National Security Law. This legislation, framed under the pretext of ensuring stability, has ironically sparked instability. Critics assert that it effectively muzzles any dissent against Beijing's rule, a stark deviation from the region's erstwhile democratic fabric. Historical instances like the large-scale pro-democracy protests that once engulfed the city are now met with swift crackdowns. Prominent pro-democracy activists are routinely arrested, and freedom of expression is increasingly curtailed. Since the law's 2020 introduction, Amnesty International highlights that over 10,000 arrests have been made, reflecting the law's draconian nature. This relentless grip on Hong Kong recalls memories of the city's handover in 1997, where promises of preserving its freedoms for 50 years now seem ephemeral. Taiwan's situation is equally tense. While the island has thrived independently since 1949, China's claim and refusal to acknowledge its sovereignty remains a significant flashpoint. The waters of the Taiwan Strait have turned into a cauldron of military tensions, with China's frequent military exercises and its intrusion into Taiwan's air defense zones. The fact that China possesses the world's largest military budget and navy, as indicated by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, adds gravitas to its threats. Historically, despite these pressures, Taiwan has resolutely maintained its stance, supported ambiguously by the U.S. through its policy of strategic ambiguity. Such actions towards both Hong Kong and Taiwan amplify the narrative of China as antagonist. To many, especially in the West, These aggressive postures signify a larger Chinese ambition to exert its dominance globally, both economically and militarily. Opponents argue that if unchecked, China's actions in these regions could set a precedent for other international interventions, while others feel there's still room for cooperation and mutual understanding. In an era of rapidly shifting global power dynamics, China's assertive use of economic leverage raises alarms. Historically, nations have always jostled for influence, but China's approach has been unique in its blend of economic might and strategic coercion. By leveraging its position as the world's second largest economy, China has wielded its economic muscle to bend global geopolitics to its will, often in ways that are seen to contravene international norms. A case in point is how China has been quick to threaten economic sanctions against nations, recognizing Taiwan or casting a spotlight on its controversial human rights practices. It has also not hesitated to halt imports from countries that dared to impose sanctions on it. Beyond state-level pressures, international corporations aren't immune either. Historically, the prerequisite for many foreign firms seeking a slice of the Chinese market pie has often been technology transfers to local Chinese enterprises. Such strategies aren't mere anecdotal. In a 2021 survey by the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China, an astonishing 75% of European businesses reported experiencing some form of economic arm twisting, from market access restrictions and discriminatory government procurement practices to the aforementioned forced technology handovers. Given China's immense trade surplus with numerous countries and its gargantuan foreign exchange reserves, its economic clout is undeniable. This economic coercion is a palpable source of friction between China and the United States. To some, China's tactics symbolize an existential challenge to U.S. global leadership and national security. They argue that China's intent isn't mere regional dominance, but global supremacy, prompting calls for a more confrontational U.S. stance. Yet there exists a contrasting viewpoint suggesting that while China's methods are assertive, they don't necessarily spell doom for U.S.-China cooperation on various fronts. Throughout history, nations have used espionage as a tool to further their interests, and China's tryst with it is deeply rooted in its past. The 19th century saw China resorting to espionage to demystify Western technologies and military know-how. Fast forward to the 20th century, espionage became China's silent weapon during the tumultuous Cold War era. Now, in the age of digitalization, this crafty pursuit has taken on a more covert, digital form.
放心不是别人能赐予，特别是在关键技术、核心技术上，只能靠中国人自己的努力，否则你只能跟着别人走。
China's digital espionage initiatives aren't merely conjectures, but are bolstered by events and data. Back in 2017, the U.S. Department of Justice indicted 5 Chinese nationals for allegedly infiltrating the computer networks of corporate giants like Westinghouse Electric and SolarWorld. A year later, in 2018, a stern warning came from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, cautioning that Chinese cyber operatives were eyeing critical infrastructures, notably power and water systems. By 2020, tech behemoth Microsoft identified novel malware strains emanating from China, designed to infiltrate U.S. and European governmental bodies and think tanks. And it isn't just isolated incidents. In a comprehensive study conducted in 2021 by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, the findings were explicit. China was spearheading malicious cyber activities against the U.S., casting a wide net that encompassed sectors from government and defense to academia. This aggressive digital footprint, coupled with China's historical opacity regarding its cyber intentions, a combative stance on intellectual property rights, its rapidly expanding military arsenal, and its ballooning global economic clout, highlights the growing apprehensions surrounding China. Many in the West, particularly the U.S., view these activities as direct threats to national security, with concerns that China aims to filch intellectual property and classify data to secure economic and technological ascendancies. While some voices argue for a cooperative approach between the U.S. and China, the overwhelming sentiment tilts towards suspicion. The Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, China's grand global infrastructure project, harks back to the nation's historical approach to expanding its influence. Centuries ago, China conceived the famed Silk Road, connecting its vast territories with Far West and the Middle East, showcasing its deep-rooted inclination towards using trade routes to extend its reach. Fast forward to the 20th century, China's massive investments in regions like Africa and Latin America reflect a similar playbook, suggesting a consistent pattern in its foreign relations strategy. Today's BRI is seen by many as an ambitious extension of these historical tactics. Under the banner of the BRI, infrastructural behemoths have risen. Notable examples include massive projects in Pakistan and Sri Lanka, countries that have taken substantial loans from China for these endeavors. There's a looming cloud of concern, as these heavy financial obligations might push these nations towards potential debt traps, rendering them susceptible to Chinese control in case of defaults. However, it's not just the economic ramifications of the BRI that raise eyebrows. The environmental consequences, too, are under scrutiny. The Chinese-funded dam in Ethiopia serves as a stark example, where the project has resulted in significant displacements and ecological degradation. Statistically, the numbers are staggering. The BRI is poised to be a multi-trillion-dollar endeavor, with China already pouring billions into it. The global economic and geopolitical axis seems to be tilting. Critics view the BRI as more than just infrastructure. They warn of potential militarization, the idea that the BRI could be a conduit for increased Chinese military presence in partner nations. While many in the West, particularly the United States, view these activities as a direct challenge to their global preeminence, when synthesized, the historical patterns, the colossal financial commitments, the strategic placements of these projects, and the potential geopolitical implications make the BRI a focal point in the debate around China's role as the chief geopolitical adversary. China's wolf warrior diplomacy, a reference to its increasingly combative approach in international relations, is often cited as a linchpin in the mounting arguments positioning China as the prime geopolitical adversary. Historically, China has never shied away from assertive diplomacy. The nation's past is punctuated with episodes of resistance against external pressures, notably the series of confrontations in the 19th century with Western powers. Fast forward to recent times, the wolf warrior strategy has found its manifestation in a series of confrontations. For instance, in 2017, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, taking a bold stance, warned the U.S. of China's intent to fight to the end if the latter challenged its South China Sea interests.
These are to open a new chapter of win-win cooperation between China and the world. We will put the development of China-US relations on a healthy track.
Such assertiveness wasn't isolated. The next year, in 2018, Chinese ambassador to the U.S. didn't mince words when accusing the U.S. of bullying China. By 2019, the Chinese Foreign Ministry echoed a similar sentiment, with spokesperson Geng Shuang declaring China's willingness to enact countermeasures against U.S. tariffs. Such bristling postures aren't without repercussions. Data from a 2020 Pew Research Center survey pinpoints this. Favorable American perceptions of China plummeted from a robust 72% in 2005 to a mere 25% by 2020. Worryingly for global peace, 73% of the respondents viewed China as a direct threat to U.S. interests. While the wolf warrior approach garners attention, the interpretation is divided. Some contend it paints China as an increasingly authoritarian state with expansionist aims, potentially threatening U.S. interests and those of its allies. Opponents argue this aggressive diplomatic stance is merely a response to U.S. provocations, casting the U.S. as the provocateur and China as a nation defending its rightful interests. The border disputes between China and India have long been a source of tension, with recent clashes serving as stark reminders of the ongoing conflict. In December 2022, skirmishes erupted near the Taiwan sector of Arunachal Pradesh, resulting in minor injuries and underscoring the persistent volatility along the disputed border, where shifting geographical features often bring soldiers from both sides into direct confrontation, leading to periodic escalations and confrontations. The risk of escalation looms large over the border disputes between China and India, given the nuclear capabilities of both nations. The Galwan Valley clash in June 2020, which saw casualties on both sides, marked a significant escalation and was the first fatal confrontation since 1975. Beyond the immediate military implications, the economic fallout of any escalation poses a significant concern, with China being one of India's largest trading partners. China's economic landscape is characterized by a distinctive model known as state-led capitalism, often dubbed the China model. This approach blends national control and ownership of resources with a significant presence of private entrepreneurs driving economic activities. Under this model, the state maintains ownership of all land and exerts control over critical resources like energy and the financial system. While massive state-owned enterprises dominate sectors such as power and banking, the private sector contributes significantly to GDP growth, generating the majority of new jobs. Critics lament China's stringent control over its citizens' rights and freedoms as a regressive step, while the expansion of Chinese influence in the West, allegedly through covert, coercive, or corrupt means, is seen as a direct challenge to the legitimacy of American democracy. China's stronghold over its media landscape, both domestically and in international Chinese language platforms, has intensified apprehensions regarding its role on the global stage, amplifying the narrative of China as a primary adversary. Historically, China's penchant for controlling information is not novel. Tracing back to the 19th century, one finds instances where the nation's leaders clamped down on literary works and newspapers that dared to criticize the regime. As the world entered the 20th century, these restraints didn't wane. Instead, they reached unprecedented heights. Today's China presents a media landscape where the government's grip is absolute. They have a stranglehold over major media outlets, actively censoring narratives that may be perceived as controversial or detrimental to the party line. This containment isn't just confined within China's borders. Accusations often arise about Beijing manipulating international Chinese language media, employing them as vessels for propaganda and to disseminate disinformation. The statistical portrayal of this scenario paints a stark picture. A 2019 survey by Reporters Without Borders places China in an alarming 177th position out of 180 countries concerning press freedom. This report underscores the extent of China's media censorship, terming it the most extensive globally. More disturbing is its identification of China as one of the top jailers of journalists. However, it's essential to emphasize that while media control is significant, it's just one piece of the puzzle. A mosaic of concerns, including China's escalating military prowess, its robust diplomatic posture, and contentious human rights record, collectively shape its image as a formidable challenger in the global arena. In summary, China's rise as a global power has brought with it a myriad of complexities and challenges, shaping its image as an adversary in international relations. From territorial disputes and human rights violations to economic coercion and digital espionage, the multifaceted nature of China's actions on the global stage has sparked debates and tensions across various spheres. While some argue for cooperation and mutual understanding, others perceive China's assertiveness as a direct threat to global stability and democratic values. As the world navigates this intricate landscape, understanding the dynamics of China's interactions with the international community remains paramount for shaping future diplomatic, economic, and security policies.
China-US relationship has never been smooth sailing over the past 50 years or more, and it always faces problems of one kind or another. Yet it has kept moving forward amid twists and turns. For two large countries like China and the United States, turning their back on each other is not an option. It is unrealistic for one side to remodel the other, and conflict and confrontation has unbearable consequences for both sides.